Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people follow the rules exactly the way they were told to. And in this episode, arrogant bosses are instantly regretting it. We've got nightmare managers, power-tripping supervisors, and one boss who got so obsessed with avoiding overtime that an employee literally walked away from a murder scene. It gets absolutely wild today, so grab a snack, get comfy, and remember, this voice should only be on the Dark Fluff YouTube channel. Let's dive in. So this started several months ago. I work as a delivery driver, servicing bread and cake products for a certain yellow store chain. The store provides us a rack to display our cakes on, and it has a specific planogram. Despite this, it's generally agreed that each driver can use their own discretion to stock this shelf, including items not planned for the shelf, all except for one. The general manager of my smallest store pulls me aside a few months back, and the guy complained about my cake rack, saying, "I've had several people complaining about the prices on that shelf being mismatched, and we're forced to honor the price on the shelf." Now, this was a bit of an unusual complaint, but I was willing to fix it, saying, "Well, we can fix the pricing on that shelf, no problem. I'll just need you to scan the products and make me a tag, and I'll take care of putting them up." She immediately snaps back with, "You know that shelf has a planogram, right? How about we just stock it correctly?" Hearing that, I thought, very well. As they say, cue malicious compliance. I began stripping everything off the shelf that didn't match the tags on the rack, which meant I took everything away. The GM immediately starts questioning why her most popular sales were being taken out, to which I just said, "Well, none of this is on the planogram, so I'll take it out and replace it with what's on there, like you said." Dejected, she leaves me to it. And let me tell you, this compliance paid off twice. The first time, the same woman confronted me as soon as I arrived, advising me of holding out on her. She commented on all the nice cakes at different location stores that she's never seen in her store. I reiterated that they're not on her planogram, so I can't put them in. She then snaps back and says, "Well, can't we just put some in anyways?" To which I say with a smirk, "Not if there's not a spot for it." And she just tells me to carry on. The second time is when our imitation butter cookies rolled out. She begged me to give some to her store, and I asked if she had a spot for them. She says there can be room made, but I asked if there was a planogram for it. She just gets mad at me, and she says, "I'm sick and tired of you using my words against me like this. I just want the seasonal stuff." And I tell her, admittedly a little pointedly, "Well, it's what you said. I can't do anything about it." She just limps off. She very well could have had all the fun snacks if she would just stop being a helicopter manager. Yeah, I think we can agree the fact the manager said, "I'm tired of you using my words against me," that was a huge win for OP. And this is how you handle anyone with ridiculous demands. Follow the exact instructions to a T, guys. And this next OP is a new employee who pulls a super bold move on their new boss. Listen to this one. So this happened some years ago. I had just gotten a job working as a stock person, loading the shelves for a craft store, and the hours were unholy. It was like 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. It took quite a bit of getting used to, and because the hours were evil, the pickings for such shifts were understandably slim. So it should be no surprise that the manager was rotten scrapings at the bottom of a very dilapidated barrel. That said, the store had this training system in-house on a computer, where you got an account and you read some slideshow notes on safety. It was simple stuff really, not setting yourself on fire, and a quick overall cliff notes about OSHA saying to not twist your back while lifting. At the end, you then answer a few questions. Now see, that's what the average employee read, and even the slowest reader could zip through it in 15 to 20 minutes or so. But that's not what my training manager gave me. She pulls up a training module, didn't check that it was accurate, and she just walked away, telling me to read it so I could get to work. And the very first line of a massive training module said, "As the new store manager, you must know and understand the laws you must follow." To which I thought, uh-oh, hang on. So I called the manager over walkie-talkie, and I say, training manager, I think you gave me the wrong... She just stops me right there, and she says, "Joseph, I gave you the same training module that I give everyone else." To which I respond, I really think you should double check. She then snaps at me saying, "Stop making excuses and get to it. Don't bother me anymore." I of course tried once more, but she snaps at me again. So cue malicious compliance. Now let me try to help you envision this monstrosity before me. Imagine a phone book scanned into the computer, divided into over 100 sections. Every section has 20 subsections, and every subsection had between 5 and 20 sub-subsections, and every single sub-subsection was 20 pages long. It was really boring stuff, like discriminatory practices in hiring and managing employees, harassments, and all the ways a store manager could get themselves and the business sued, and how to avoid this fate at all costs. There was a lot more, but that's how far I managed to read before my malicious compliance ended. There was still a lot left to read. About half an hour in, the training manager kicks me off, and she had me help working the shelf, berating me for taking so much time. I again told her I had the wrong module, and again, she basically told me to shut up and stop making excuses. She then went to the computer and she closed my module, clearly without even acknowledging the gigantic screen of text instead of the little neat slideshow with pictures and big letters. So cue malicious compliance again. I tried twice and she wasn't listening. That was all I owed her. A month into my employment and training, I had still not completed reading the phone book, having been given only 30 minutes each day. Finally, the store manager, the actual store manager, comes to see why I was incapable of completing a module that should have only taken me 15 minutes. The guy basically asked me if I could read, to which I respond, "Store manager, I can read just fine. But as the new store manager who will be taking over for you, I really must insist on reading the entire module." Cue the sound of a screech. Cartoon sounds of an accident here. The store manager says to me, I'm sorry. I respond, "Training manager told me to read the store manager training module, and I need actual time to get through it. If I'm not the store manager, then I need to be given the correct module." The store manager said, "Well, did you tell her she gave you the wrong module?" I let him know, yes, and I quote, she said, "I gave you the same training module that I give everyone else. Stop making excuses and get to it." I let him know I told her twice and she just wouldn't listen. The store manager went very quiet. He silently takes me to the break room and got me on the training computer, and he removed the store manager module from my account and he put the regular employee module up. I zoomed through that bad boy in less than 10 minutes and got on with my work. Meanwhile, the store manager and the training manager disappeared for a long time. Sadly, the training manager did not improve her behavior in the following year of my employment at the company. She remained toxic, incompetent, and a workplace bully right up until I reported her to the hotline with 6 typed up pages of documentation. The regional manager had to come in and put the fear of God into her before she got very quiet for my remaining few months of employment. I moved out of state after that. Guys, I am just so glad that malicious compliance worked out in OP's favor. And again, the fact that OP was a new worker and they pulled that move, props to them. The confidence, right? Like, I'm just saying, I don't think I would have had the guts to pull that off, not as a new worker. And what's worse than a manager who doesn't listen is one who thinks they know better, like the Karens in these next 3 posts, guys. Listen to these ones. Many years ago, I used to work part-time for my university running student events. Before this, I participated in these events as a student. As a staff member, I ran the events myself. We had a new college head who was much older, approximately 50 to 60, while everyone else was in their early 20s. This woman was the most pig-headed, arrogant fool that you can imagine. And despite being new, she wouldn't sit back and observe how things worked or listen to those on our team who had been there for years. No matter what you told her, when she announced something that wouldn't work or would cause problems, the answer was always the same. She would say, "I'm older, so I know best." It didn't matter if it would take you longer to do it her way, or in one case, if it was technically illegal. During event planning, one look at the schedule told me that she hadn't allocated the team properly. Here's the email exchange. I say to her, "It's probably not a good idea to have the whole team in an hour before the event. Most of them are standing around doing nothing. It's best to get 5 or so people in for setup, most of the team in for running the event, and hold back another 3 to 4 for cleanup." She replies, "No, no. I want everyone in helping out equally an hour before the event." I tell her they're only meant to do 2 hours of work per event. If you have them an hour early for a 2-hour event, that's 3 hours. They'll all leave before cleanup. The slackers will slack off and the proactives will end up doing everything. And this is what she said. She said, "I'm older than you, so I know best. Do as you're told." Cue malicious compliance. I respond, "Fine, but I've got some personal business to do directly after the event. I'll handle procurement and setup, but I'll need to leave right after the event is over." She responds, "That's fine. On to other business." So the day of the event, the whole team shows up an hour before for setup. As expected, 5 or so did all of the setup work, while most of the team just stood around on their phones. Some even got bored and they wandered off doing nothing. It wasn't the team members' fault for standing around, because only so many people can do meal prep and set up tables without getting in each other's way. 10 minutes before the event, the college head shows up, and everything's running smoothly. The event was a lot of fun, and some of the team continued to wander off. Some ran the events, some participated. I was running around as a gopher, letting the college head take credit for the event in front of everyone. Not doing any work, mind you, but taking credit for it. I made sure to remind her that I had to leave right at the end of the event for personal business, in front of the other colleague heads several times. To be extra spiteful, I neglected to stop several team members from wandering off, who had done no work other than standing around, talking, and eating. And I encouraged several people who had definitely done 2 hours of work to call it a night, and I thanked them for their help. Forgetful me, I also didn't tell team members standing around during the events to start cleaning up as things were finishing. All the free food was gone, all the games were over, both students and team members were wandering off into the night, and all of a sudden, the college head says to me, "Wait, where are you going? There's so much mess, and we've got to put away all the tables and tidy up all the games, but everyone has left." I let her know, yeah, we probably should have saved up a few team members to do cleanup, but they've all already done their 2 hours. Anyway, like I told you earlier, I've got some personal business to attend directly after the event, so I'll just see you tomorrow. She then screeches and says, "What personal business is it? This will take 2 hours to do all on my own." I just tell her, "I'm sorry, but I said personal business because I'm not comfortable discussing it with you or the team. It's really quite personal and I'm gonna be late." I then wandered off home for my personal business of closing all of my curtains and playing video games in my underwear, just chuckling at the thought of that arrogant Karen having to do all that work by herself. But that's not all. She actually left a formal complaint about me, but it really didn't go anywhere. I just forwarded the email exchange to management. Sadly, pig-headed people are always pig-headed because they don't learn no matter what. I eventually quit, and a few months later, I was introduced to my replacement's replacement, who was also ready to quit. So I used to work for one of the top delivery companies in my city. There was a lot less competition 15 years ago. I was very good at my specific delivery job, and I often undertook every office task from single delivery routes to maintaining the office and delivery distribution to all routes. Then one day, in comes the new manager, and it was the cliche that you dread. You've probably all met the type. Suit slightly too big, and a trainee mustache. The guy had just finished university, and to his credit, got himself a shiny business degree. Now, the problem with this company was every office around the whole country was run differently, and this poor manager was expecting every person to do things by the letter. But most of the work was done on goodwill since we were allowed to finish for the day when we completed our deliveries. It was creating a rod for our own backs, to be honest, but it was nice to be finished earlier on lighter days. Finally, on his third day of watching me daily and asking me why I was doing things in a certain order, I told him my delivery route was complex. It's to be done in a certain order to ensure that timed deliveries got there on time, as well as to ensure optimum delivery speeds and minimum delay. Hearing me say that, he just scoffs and says, No, it doesn't work like that. I simply stared for a few seconds and I said, I don't understand. He wanted it by the letter today, as per company guidelines. I of course argue very hard against it, and I said he'll really regret it because we won't complete the route. But instead, he insisted I was wrong because it was all timed and measured, and he knows logistics, blah blah blah. So after a 15-minute heated discussion, I did what I was told, to the letter. The 5 staff I fed deliveries to weren't happy, but they understood. And let me tell you, it was like a domino effect of carnage. At 12:30 p.m., we all called into the office to report the failed timed deliveries, which he promptly freaked out about because they were strictly monitored. The subsequent enforced break times and shuffling required also left 15 to 20% of each walk unfinished, which he also now has to complete himself on top of the timed ones. He had to fill out reports for all the failed 1 p.m. deliveries, all the walk failures, and then he had to call all the managers from other offices to finish it all. They all finished around 4 hours late that day. The guy wasn't very popular. The next day, he came to me and he asked me to show him the mechanics of the delivery route in detail because, quote, I didn't expect that to happen, if I'm honest. It was close enough to an apology for me. We actually became good friends over time, and he never questioned me when I said nope ever again. So this happened around this time last year. I'm a website developer, and I used to work for the stupidest buffoon of a man who had no clue about web development, but the guy thought he did. He just ran the company, managed the accounts, yada yada yada. The guy had read articles on web development, and he would force us to implement the new things that he had spent 5 minutes reading up on almost weekly. One day, he was messing around on the company's website, and because of some work I was doing, one of the pages he was trying to look at was temporarily unpublished, resulting in a 404 error code, which is basically what the website tells you when a page can't be found at the URL you're visiting. The guy went berserk on me, and he lectured me on how this was completely unprofessional, and if a customer ever saw it, we would lose them. I just rolled my eyes, and I said it was only for a minute, and it was fine. He then told me that we needed to be alerted somehow every time a user gets a 404 error on the site. Now, first of all, this is ridiculous. You don't need to be alerted every single time this happens, and second of all, sites get hundreds and hundreds of 404 errors every day due to automated scripts trying random URLs to see if they can find anything good, or spiders trying to look for pages that may have once existed but don't anymore. I explained this to him, but he wasn't having it. He says to me, no, no, no. We need to be emailed every single time this happens so we can fix it. I was crying with despair internally at this point, but I decided it would be hilarious to prove my point anyways. So I set up a script on our 404 template that would email him every time a 404 page was displayed, and I left it overnight. I came in the next day to find him sitting there just scrolling through pages and pages of his webmail trying to delete the 4,000 or so emails that arrived overnight. And the best part was you could search for the subject, but at most, only 100 were displayed at a time. So the guy would have had to delete 40 pages of emails. I also made sure to take my sweet time disabling it, so he probably got a couple hundred more before I got around to doing it. In my first job, I worked in IT as an access and permissions administrator at a large company with significant technological debt. The environment included custom software dating back to the Windows 9X era. Initially, the work was quite tedious, involving a lot of back-and-forth communication between multiple departments. We had to ensure that every employee had the necessary training and documentation to access data in the scope requested by their manager. Additionally, we needed approval from the manager of the department related to the system role in question. On top of that, the company's excessive paper-only bureaucratic workflow made the work go at a snail's pace. A single SAP account for a blue-collar worker required at least 3 forms signed by different people. The heads of departments responsible for signing those papers didn't feel any urgency to sign them to us quickly. A good example of this is when I myself waited for over 2 weeks after being hired in the IT department before my first account was set up. Until then, I only had a guest account that allowed me to access the main internal website with the company's procedures, regulations, and other basic information. Up to this point, each signed form had to be physically delivered to us, which was agonizingly slow given that the company had multiple branches. We then decided to automate away the paperwork. Our first step was to allow the use of scanned documents. It was a partial success. While it eliminated the courier delays, management still required us to sign the physical copies afterwards, which we mass stamped at the end of each month. The next step was to introduce a fully electronic workflow. We faced significant resistance from upper management, so we had to settle on a system that mostly replicated the existing paper processes. Despite this, it was a game changer. We created presets that managers could select and customize as needed, using data from these customizations to create better-fitting presets. We also developed workflows that automatically generated and assigned subtickets for necessary approvals, and we tracked how long it took, sending reminders if needed. Finally, we got approval from HR to access layoff data to generate user block and removal tickets. Sometime after we rolled out the new system, the HR/payroll manager made a big fuss. She was furious that her team was still waiting weeks to get their permissions, and she questioned whether all of our work had been for nothing. That really struck a chord with me. Inside, I was overjoyed, but I did my best to keep a neutral expression. At the time, we were working on summary reports with burn-down and bottleneck charts, and I already knew the tickets requesting HR/payroll access were spending over most of their lifespan waiting for her or one of her sub-managers to approve them. The manager immediately went on the defensive, claiming she couldn't keep up with the amount of tickets. She then requested a change. She wanted any request from her employee to be automatically approved within the relevant scope of their sub-department. For example, A request for an HR worker to have full HR access and limited payroll access would be automatically approved for HR access but not for payroll, and vice versa. Now, I was skeptical but wasn't exactly in a position to argue. I asked my boss to join the discussion, and I explained that the goal was to prevent overly permissive approvals that could lead to unauthorized access. I tried to convince her to brainstorm together potential edge cases before making a blanket approval, but she was already set on her decision and she wasn't interested in discussing details. My boss just shrugs and said it would be her responsibility. He told her to write up an official document outlining the change, and we'd proceed with the implementation. The only request that we had was to include a line that each such request would still be created, assigned to as normal, and marked as automatically approved by her name. I upload the scan into our system, and anticipating that it would eventually backfire, I made a photocopy to keep handy in the top drawer of my desk. The original copy went to the archive. A few weeks later, she storms into our room. The speed at which she flung the door open made it clear she was furious. She demanded to know why we granted full access to payroll data to her subordinate. I think it was the only time I'd ever heard anyone yell in the company. I calmly reminded her of her request to automatically approve in-department access requests. She wasn't having it though, explaining that one of her low-ranking subordinates from the payroll subdepartment had accessed the salaries of everyone in their department, including managers, and was unhappy with their paycheck disparity. She actually yelled at me saying, "Are you stupid? Isn't that obvious they shouldn't be able to do that?" To which I respond, "Well, yeah, to a human, but that decision was automated away by your request." I then hand her a copy of the document she signed, which instructed us to automatically approve any and all such tickets without exception. Immediately afterwards, she asked us to roll back the change while she wrote up another department to cancel the previous one. In the following days, she meticulously reviewed all those tickets and requested us to reduce access for several users. I have to admit, she did a thorough job and she kept up good pace in reviewing new requests. She was doing it daily instead of once every week or two as before. In the end, we managed to distill a subset of permissions that could be approved automatically, and proceeded to implement a similar approach with other departments. Now, P.S. I don't know whether that payroll employee managed to get the raise, but I'm sure they weren't fired, as we didn't receive any tickets to block or remove any accounts from that department. So in a past work life, I worked at a small newspaper where corporate insisted on paying me hourly, despite the job not being capable of being done in 40 hours. Also, anyone who knows the news industry knows that news happens more than just 9 to 5. It was implied that you just work when needed and you don't miss deadlines. I did that for years. One week, I end up working over 100 hours, lots of huge breaking news stories, and I was the only one working at that newspaper. I had asked for 20 hours of overtime pay, having worked 60 hours of overtime that week, and my regional manager refused because it hadn't been priorly authorized. So I told him from then on I work exactly 40 hours. I didn't care what news happened after, I would cover it on my next workday. About 6 months go by, no major news missed, but a few things were later than they should be, and then another hell week hits. Several major car crashes, a bomb threat, and Friday about 4 p.m. a murder happens. I head out to the murder scene. I get photos, talk to an officer, and I'm told an update's coming at 6:30 p.m. So I write up a very short piece with the info I had by 4:30. At 5 p.m., I go home for the weekend. Readers and bosses reached out several times over the weekend. Readers, I told we would have an update on Monday and that nobody was scheduled to work the weekend. The bosses, I ignore until Monday. When I came in, he tried to yell at me. And that's when I pointed out it would have been unpaid overtime and it wasn't approved. By Wednesday, they offered me a raise and they put me on salary, and I happily accepted. Listen, with OP happily accepting, I sure hope the salary and raise was well worth it, because knowing that OP sometimes works 100-hour weeks, guys, is outrageous, and hopefully this wasn't the boss trying to pull a shady move on OP. And the top comment of this post says, whether authorized or not, in the United States, your employer is required by the Fair Labor Standards Act to pay you for all overtime you worked. OP worked 100-hour week and was only paid for 40 hours. They owe OP 60 hours of pay at the 1.5 time rate. You should contact your state labor board or a private attorney. You're allowed to sue for damages plus attorney's fees. OP's boss violated federal law. Don't work for free. It hurts every other worker out there. But guys, let me know your thoughts on this post. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/MaliciousCompliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, where psycho Karen bosses are getting taught lessons they'll never forget. Go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.